The moment my husband walked away from the barbecue, I laughed. I thought he was being dramatic. I thought he wanted to punish me for flirting with our handsome new neighbor in front of everyone. I even rolled my eyes as I watched him disappear through the back door of our house in the warm afternoon sunlight. But 20 minutes later, when I found what he had left on the kitchen counter, the laughter died in my throat. There was no angry note. No accusation. No threat. Just a small envelope with my name on it, and 3 words written across the front that made my hands begin to shake. I'm sorry, Mara. If you believe that kindness can heal people and that second chances can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, leave a comment, and subscribe to Echoes of Stories. Because sometimes, the person we think is overreacting is actually the person carrying a pain we never bothered to see. It had been one of those perfect summer afternoons when everything looked better than it really was. Golden sunlight poured over our backyard, the grass smelled freshly cut, children chased one another between lawn chairs, and smoke from the barbecue drifted lazily toward the pale blue sky. Our neighbors had gathered for our annual street barbecue, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. My name is Mara Ellison, and at 38, I had become an expert at pretending everything in my marriage was fine. My husband, Corwin, was a quiet man who worked long hours and rarely complained. He remembered every bill, every appointment, every responsibility. He was dependable in the way a locked door was dependable. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped feeling like his wife and started feeling like another item on his list of things to maintain. Then came Nolan Reeves, our new neighbor. He had moved into the blue house across the street only 3 weeks earlier, and he had the kind of easy confidence that made people notice him without trying. He was divorced, according to neighborhood gossip, and had a young daughter who spent most afternoons riding a purple bicycle around the block. At the barbecue, Nolan stood near the grill wearing a faded gray shirt, laughing with the other men as he tried to keep a tray of burgers from burning. When he caught me watching, he smiled. I smiled back. It was harmless, at least at first. But after months of feeling invisible, harmless attention felt dangerously powerful. Nolan complimented the dress I was wearing. He teased me about my terrible taste in barbecue sauce. I laughed too loudly. I touched his arm when he made me laugh, and for a few minutes I forgot about the coldness that had settled into my marriage. I forgot about the nights when Corwin sat beside me on the couch without saying a word. I forgot about the mornings when he left before I woke up. I forgot how many times I had tried to tell him that I missed him, only to receive a distracted nod because he was already thinking about work. From across the yard, I noticed Corwin watching us. His expression didn't change. He simply stood there holding a paper plate, his eyes fixed on me. I should have recognized something in his face, but I didn't. Instead, I turned back toward Nolan and made another playful remark. Nolan laughed, and I laughed with him. Then Corwin quietly walked over and asked me to stop. He didn't shout. He didn't embarrass me. He didn't accuse me of cheating. He simply said that whatever I was doing with Nolan was hurting him and asked me to stop. I remember staring at him as if he had suddenly become a stranger. I told him he was being ridiculous. I told him it was only flirting and that he needed to loosen up. He looked at me for several seconds, then nodded. That nod should have frightened me. Instead, I watched him walk away. He didn't slam the door. He didn't make a scene. He simply went inside. The barbecue continued, but something inside me had shifted. Nolan eventually said he needed to check on his daughter, and the yard slowly became quieter as families began leaving. I remained outside, pretending I didn't care. But the moment I entered our house, I noticed the silence. Corwin's car was still in the driveway. I called his name, but there was no answer. Then I saw the envelope. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a photograph. The photograph was old, slightly faded, showing Corwin and me standing together on a beach during our first year of marriage. I was laughing, my hair blowing across my face, while Corwin looked at me as though I were the most beautiful person he had ever seen. I unfolded the letter. Corwin wrote that he wasn't leaving because of Nolan. He was leaving because he had spent the last year realizing that I was unhappy, and instead of fighting for my attention, he had been quietly trying to make my life easier. He admitted that he had been working extra hours because he was saving for something. Something he had never told me about. My heart began pounding as I read the next page. He had been saving for a small house near the coast. Not a mansion. Not some extravagant vacation property. Just a little place where we could spend weekends together, away from work, phones, responsibilities, and the endless routine that had slowly swallowed our marriage. He had planned to surprise me on our 10th anniversary, which was only 6 weeks away. Then he wrote something that broke me. He said he had overheard me telling a friend months earlier that I felt lonely even when he was sitting beside me. He said that sentence had stayed with him every day. He hadn't known how to fix it, so he had started working harder, believing that if he could give me a better life, maybe I would feel happier. But he had misunderstood what I needed. I didn't need a better house. I needed him. And instead of telling him that clearly, I had punished him for not being able to read my heart. I sank into the kitchen chair and cried. For the first time, I realized how easily we can mistake someone's silence for indifference. Corwin hadn't been emotionally absent because he didn't care. He had been exhausted, frightened, and completely lost. He had been loving me in the only way he knew how, while I had been measuring his love by everything he failed to say. But the letter wasn't finished. Corwin admitted that seeing me flirt with Nolan had finally forced him to accept something painful. He couldn't keep trying to earn a place in the heart of someone who no longer seemed to want him there. He said he wasn't angry. He said he hoped I would find happiness, even if that happiness wasn't with him. And then came the final sentence. I left quietly because I still love you too much to make you hate me. I couldn't breathe. I ran outside, but his car was gone. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. I called him repeatedly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I drove past his office, but he wasn't there. I even stood across the street from Nolan's house one evening, realizing how foolish everything had become. Nolan had never been the person I wanted. He had simply been a mirror showing me how desperately I wanted to feel noticed. That realization hurt more than anything. On the 4th morning, I found Corwin sitting alone at a small cafe near the park. He looked older than he had a week earlier. His shoulders were tired, and his coffee sat untouched. I sat across from him. For once, I didn't defend myself. I didn't blame him. I didn't mention Nolan. I simply told him the truth. I told him I had become so desperate to feel wanted that I had forgotten to notice the person who had been quietly wanting me all along. I told him I was sorry, not because I was afraid of losing our marriage, but because I finally understood how deeply I had wounded someone who had never stopped trying to love me. Corwin listened. Then he told me something I would never forget. He said forgiveness wasn't a door that opened because someone apologized. It was a road two people had to walk together. So we began walking. Not back into the old marriage. Into a new one. We went to counseling. We learned how to talk before resentment became silence. Corwin stopped assuming that providing everything meant he was communicating love. I stopped expecting him to magically understand feelings I was too afraid to express. We had difficult conversations. We cried. We argued. We almost gave up more than once. But slowly, something changed. A few months later, we drove to the coast. Corwin took me to the little house he had been saving for. It wasn't perfect. The windows were old, the kitchen was tiny, and the paint on the porch was peeling. But when I stepped inside, I saw photographs of us covering one wall. Our first Christmas. Our first apartment. Our wedding. The ridiculous camping trip where it rained for 3 days. And beneath all of them was a new photograph from the barbecue. It showed me standing alone in the backyard after everyone had left, looking toward the house. Corwin had taken it before he walked away. He told me he kept it because it reminded him of the moment everything could have ended. I looked at him and cried. Not because the marriage was perfect. Because it wasn't. Because love had survived the moment when both of us had failed it. Years later, whenever someone asks me what saved our marriage, I never say the beach house. I never say counseling. I never say the apology. I say honesty. We almost lost everything because we were both waiting for the other person to understand what we were too afraid to say. That afternoon at the barbecue taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life. Sometimes the person who walks away quietly isn't trying to punish you. Sometimes they're walking away because they've run out of ways to ask you to see their pain. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they leave the door open just wide enough for you to finally become the person they needed you to be. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and move on. Like the video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Echoes of Stories. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need their message more than we realize. And before the story ends, I have one special request. Comment the words, "I choose to listen," if you believe love isn't about finding perfect people, but about learning to understand imperfect ones before it's too late. That evening, as the sun disappeared over the ocean, Corwin took my hand. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. For the first time in years, the silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. And I finally understood that sometimes love doesn't disappear. Sometimes it simply becomes quiet, waiting for two people to stop talking past each other and finally listen. That was the day I thought my husband had walked away from me. But in the end, he had only walked far enough for me to finally find my way back to him.